Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a TASC Break with us at the TASC platform. This is our new podcast that we are deciding to launch. We are honored to have Professor Gudela Grote. She is now starting with us as the TASC co-chair. So we are so excited to bring her and all of her knowledge and skill and amazing insights that we are going to be able to bring to the TASC community. Can you tell us more about your background and how you became involved with the TASC platform?
Yes, very happy to. First of all, very happy also to join the TASC platform as its co-director. My background is work in organizational psychology. I chose to be at a technical university a long time ago because I feel technology is a major driver for how people work, and the task started around questions of future of work, so I thought that's the place to be.
Wonderful. We're so lucky that we met you at this very precise time where all of our needs were met. And also I think that as TASC is something that's been evolving out of societal change. We were there during COVID, so we've been right in the midst of a lot of different changes. So having you as expert part of our not only steering group, but now, of course, as part of our chair is really amazing. What inspired you to focus on accountable AI in development and use?
I've been working on technology forever. I mean, as I said, that was a big motivation to actually come to the ETH in Zurich. And that has always really been this question when you automate tasks more, what's the role of people in it? And often people get into this funny role then that they're still accountable for what happens, but they don't really have control anymore over what's happening. And you can look at like recent these Boeing MAX accidents where originally they really tried to blame the pilots for not managing the aircraft well, and then eventually they really had to admit it was really not, I mean, the pilots, there was nothing they could do, and it was really a matter of the development within Boeing that had gone awry. And there's plenty of other examples like that. So that question has been with me for a long time. And what's new now, I think, with AI is that before you could say, well, presumably the technology developers are in control, and then you would think also maybe they should then actually be accountable, which now for Boeing has been the case now. I guess they say, okay, it's really on us. But now with AI, I mean, the technology developers would also say, we're not in control. No. I mean, this stuff does stuff on its own. It's intransparent, and we don't know either, and it's dynamic, and it learns. So, well, if they aren't in control anymore, then who is? And then where should accountability go?
Yes.
That, to me, was the main motivation for this.
And right now, people are really scared about that. Everyone is really like, I think because once, we had ChatGPT that went public and open, people were like, what do you mean it can do all these things, but who's in control and who's going to direct this? And does anyone care? And all these fear kind of really prompted people, but they're not having the conversations, right, around like how we create this. And this is not the first time AI has been used. Maybe people weren't conscious of it, but now it's part of the public conversation. What are points in this that for you, because you've been working on this, are really the tough ones that we need to work on, like when it comes to not only the regulation, but the development of it as a society of AI?
I think one critical thing, I mean, me being a work psychologist, so far, I think we've looked at how is work of users of technology changed, and usually not necessarily consumers like all of us, but more people at the workplace. And with all these discussions in AI, I think it becomes more and more important to actually look at what's the conditions actually of the technology developers themselves, and how should work for them be designed so that then control and accountability works together for them. I think with artificial intelligence, the question becomes, where does the accountability lie? It obviously doesn't lie with users anymore. It has to go to developers because they're the only ones who have a chance to actually control that technology. It could be part also, maybe they don't always use the most fancy and most intransparent AI. Maybe they use simpler models, etc. But do they actually have those choices?
Yeah.
And that becomes then a super basic question of work design.
But I think that's also where the interdisciplinary side comes into it, right? Because we're let's say some developers are just doing it for this specific aim, but not necessarily seeing how it can impact different levels of society. So how do we create that place where we have more meetings of minds, of more people involved in the development of AI, but also of its use and how it's progressing?
I think there has been for a long time this idea of participatory ergonomics, it was called way back, where you would say, well, you definitely want user involvement very early on, before any technology actually gets developed. So even during the process of whatever requirements, engineering, etc., you would want the future users in. Everybody has always found that is not easy, because the future users don't even quite get what is this new technology about. And especially if then the technology becomes more autonomous itself, you don't quite know which direction kind of is it going to go. But that basic idea that you want stakeholders, and not just users, but also regulators, maybe representatives of employers, employees, whatever, depending on what the system is, you want all of them in the discussion very early on. And then obviously a big issue becomes power, and who has power to make decisions, and can you create a setting where you have a more kind of equal kind of stakeholder dialogue.
And that comes to the heart of where we are. We're in international Geneva, heart of so many international organizations who are all working around more into a global corporation, and where the problem with AI, it's kind of cross-cutting all these different IOs. There, you've got the trade here, you've got labor here, you've got health here, and everyone has some kind of link. And we as TASC Platform are trying to strive to break some of those barriers. And I think that's going to be an interesting point of conversation, to have people kind of interact in these spaces. So that's something that we're really interested in working with you, and to see how we continue the conversation on that, but also how we find initiatives that are actually working. I think that's the other side, right? To find those few cases where they actually found a solution and they're implementing. Can we not learn from this? Do you have some in mind of like initiatives that you have heard of, or like these different like programs that have worked and that you think are?
Maybe not so much within AI, because I mean, in that sense, that is fairly new. But I think over forever, I mean, it's always, I mean, we are quite conscious all that in the end solutions lie in actually cooperative dialogue. And I think there have been examples of this working in various spheres. One thing I always point to, which I thought was really interesting, a few years back, and it was linked already to transformations through AI and other technologies, was the Swiss Railways. And they started what they called the digitization fund, which was just a sum of money that was kind of governed by a joint body of the Swiss Railways top management and the unions.
Yes.
They started the project with the basic question of how Swiss Railways can deal with digital transformation. And that to me was a really interesting setting to, from the start, have this discussion across the different kind of perspectives. It's not easy. And in the middle of the very first project, which I was involved in, they got into a situation where the main labor union representative didn't want to be at the table anymore.
Oh my goodness. Talk about chaos.
Eventually he came back and whatever. But anyway, to me, it was really interesting, because as an initiative really, that a company took.
And one that have such huge impact on like everyone's general day to day. For now, again, as you said, now years later, we are, we really pride ourselves for how efficient this all works and how it's integrated. So that is true, that there's some of these cases where, we think about AI as this new technology changing things, but the issue of collaboration and cooperation, creating things together, is still the same. Well, that leads me to another question about, we're looking about key challenges that we need to start thinking about tackling when it comes to demographics planning? Because I know that's something that you were also working on, but also when we look at creating a future for all generations, when we look at this thinking of not only the workplace, but in so many different spheres, what are key challenges that you find that we need to start working on or start tackling now, as opposed to leaving it for the future?
I mean, first of all, I think to actually be aware that, I mean, coming from my background, looking at working, to me, it's strange that people still have the assumption that we should stop working at 65 when we might live to 90 or 100. The time that we can be productive has become much longer. And I think lots of people want to be productive beyond 65. And to find different ways of actually integrating that into, and that could be to continue their paid employment, but it could be also other forms of being active longer. I think would be something very important. And I think related to that, I think we're struggling a lot with a lot of kind of intergenerational stereotypes. And if we don't overcome them from both sides,
Yes.
We're not going anywhere.
Yeah. No, it's really always a hard conversation when you, as you said, you have the young people saying, oh, the older people are taking all the resources, stealing everything. And then you say that the older ones, like the younger ones, don't want to listen to what I've experienced or anything. So there's always this back and forth and trying to find this meeting ground. And I always take this African example, but I'm Ugandan. So I have this example where, after, let's say, they've passed their productive years, what would actually happen? They wouldn't actually stop working or being active. They would just now become board members of schools. And so their role would change. Let's say their positionment in society would not be less, but just would kind of have a new progression and things like that in terms of how we're thinking of the new work life, cycle. What does it look like? Do we have room for this innovative space for them then to create a new space where it's needed, where we're not having dialogue, where we're having people who are a little bit lost and need some guidance, and we have people who have guidance? How can we bring that back? How can we, reconnect these generations, right?
I mean, I think there's, some really interesting examples where you actually try to bring different generations together in the same spot, right? I mean, there's projects in architecture where from the start you would build that there would be the kindergarten on the ground floor, and the rest of it would be kind of a senior residence. So yes. Whatever that, they would engage with the kids, which they probably would like, and vice versa.
Exactly.
That's something. How can you create just simply physical proximity as a starting point? And then again, also just looking at different roles that people can have. Your example of becoming the advisor of things. I think to some extent similar things happen here too. People retire and then they might do a lot of volunteering work, or they might be on these boards of whatever kind of organizations. There's a bit of that here too. But I think overall it's one key in all of this is everybody keeps saying, well, knowledge develops so quickly. There's no way that the older people can keep pace with that. So they might be there, but who cares, kind of.
Yeah.
And the understanding of different kinds of knowledge. Also, again, learning. How much I could see very much that I'm not necessarily always want to be kind of the elder person that knows so much and tell other people. I would just like to learn also, and to give older people a space to learn. Is I think largely missing. When you even look within companies, they stop their continuing education programs for people when they're 50 or something, right? And then the assumption is older people can't learn anyway, and there's tons of evidence to the contrary.
Absolutely.
So rather than being the person, I know it all and you have to come to me, I'd love to be taught by younger people too. And that is very tricky. We did one project on that, really just on knowledge exchange, where older people would go to younger people and get advice and whatever, and what would be conditions that would work for them to do this. And obviously, again, stereotypes is a big part of that. and we just found that then the older people that did do that and had positive experience with that, that grew their willingness to stay engaged, to stay employed, to keep learning, right? And so to me, that is maybe a little bit of a switch of perspective. It's not about the wise old people,
that is also,
but it's actually about old people that are just ready
yeah.
to learn as young people are, but maybe different things and at a different speed or whatever, right?
No, and I think that's crucial that we change that mindset. And it's specifically in the workspace, because we always have these kind of stereotypes, as you're saying, that, oh, we're not hiring after a certain age. You know, they stop hiring people. And so then how can we expect them to still be fluent and able to converse and everything if we're not giving them the means or the tools? At the same time, as well as a young person, I've been in an organization where I've had ideas, but how could I ever dare speak up or share them? That's also something that's been quite scary. So like how changing those mindsets and changing effectively how we decide, you know, progress is driven by. So that's so wonderful. And I wanted to introduce something. So during the task breaks, what we're going to try to do is to give people an arsenal of tools where people can use preparing themselves for this future world, but they can also use right now. There's, in terms of becoming, let's say, future knowledgeable, but also I think having that ability to plan something, to do a change, to make something different happen. We often feel that we need tools, because even if you feel inspired and you're like, I want to change this, how do I even start? How do I start the conversation? How do I do all those things? So we want to invite our guests each time to give us a task tool that maybe that you could think that, oh, this is something that I think that would motivate someone to change their mindset, or maybe this is something that could be a food for thought for people to use now, or also maybe they'll counter a situation where this will become put in practice. So I wanted to ask, do you have a task tool for us?
I think I do. We've been working on what we've called uncertainty mindsets, how people think about uncertainty, and whether uncertainty is something that's mostly kind of threatening to them, or can they see it also as an opportunity for learning and for growing. And I think just thinking through that very, very simply, I mean, what have been situations where uncertainty actually was positive for me? And I think to just reflect, even in difficult times, maybe to reflect on that. I mean, how can being confronted with uncertainty, but even maybe sometimes even actively seeking uncertainty, can be a resource for myself. Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
That's a really challenging one, because we've talked a lot about uncertainty, specifically during COVID, and everyone was like, well, that is the only certainty, that uncertainty will happen, right? That was the one thing that we kept on saying. So now thinking of it as where has it been useful? Where did it propel you? So that's a task tool for you, task community. Hey. So apart from getting like comments, I always want to invite our audience to either share them in our task community, where we have this kind of closed space for all of our thought leaders, but also on social media. Would love for you to share your thoughts and how this is, either maybe you have experiences. I think this would be a good one to interact with. So I wanted to ask you, what are topics or things that you're looking forward to delving deeper with the TASC platform and also the TASC community that we can expect from you?
I think this TASC platform, also just as you always say, the international Geneva context, I hope would prove useful to really bring together different types of expertise on all these topics that we talked about, and many more, where I find there is a huge gap between what's the kind of the general societal dialogue, what is actually the policy level on all these questions, and what is daily reality for people. And I think there's huge gaps between all of these. And to bring, I mean, we talked about kind of stakeholder dialogue, and I think this setting here is perfect to try out things around stakeholder dialogue. bring, obviously I'm a social scientist, so it's always the question also, I mean, how much is social science heard in all of this? And can you reach out to policymakers from that perspective? And that's what I definitely would like to try out with you and see how far we can get.
Yeah, so we're excited at the TASC platform. We're excited to be working with you and to see what more we can do and how we can transform thinking and hopefully be some, let's say, a little piece in the work for change. At least that's our aim. So thank you so much, Professor Gudela, for joining us. And we'll be sharing much more at the TASC community on this. See you soon for another TASC Break.